Olá, pessoal. Boa tarde. Tudo bem? Meu nome é Patrícia. Eu sou da CHT Brasil, responsável pela área de Consumer Care. E hoje nós vamos falar sobre as nossas ceras de silicones, que serão apresentadas pelo Alex, que é o nosso Head de Technical Application para Consumer Care. Ele fica na CHT da Alemanha. Após a apresentação, estaremos à disposição para possíveis questões. Ótima apresentação. Alex, é com você.
Hello to the bank, to the bong, to everybody. So I can say from Germany, good evening. It's already night outside. But it's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, so it's nice with this modern tool to have a quick trip to Brazil. And I hope you will enjoy today the presentation with us. So let's see. I hope everybody can see that now. Yeah, so today the topic will be to talk about silicone wax, so polymers with triple action and color cosmetic, or in general in say for other applications like could be also sun care. And we say this is an interesting technology which can help you to solve a lot of issues or troubles in such formulation. And yeah, let's talk about this. But before I go into this silicone waxes, I want just to point out some maybe facts about silicones that we still believe they be a good solution for personal care. And I noticed this here in Europe, there is coming a trend in cosmetic was started, I think, 5 years back, that everybody placed on the rack, silicone free, should be natural, everything like that. So one brand after the next popped up will be on there. And in Europe, they discover now, okay, everybody says sustainable, natural, things like that. And yeah, so the industry and also the European government try to say what is really sustainable, what means really helps us for the environmental. Say of clear, one key solution is, I say, using natural stuff, avoid synthetic, to look that it have no impact later on into the environmental. But also what they said, look, we have to look on the whole pictures. And there I want to point it out on the silicones that, for example, if you look on silicones, they have an excellent water footprint. So for example, for the silicones, you don't need water to make them. So that is one good point for them, that you say, okay, it's really a water saving technology here. And also to get the raw material for the silicone, so that is sand or quartz, depends how you call it, is not really needed that any forest will be removed. And also there is not needed that any, say, farmers make now corn or something like that, which is normally used for food for the chemical industry. So we prevent as well that one. Then I think what is really interesting is silicone can boost natural ingredients. I mean, together they are strong. And I think that could be a future-driven trend. As I mentioned, silicones made from sand. So that means it's an uncritical raw material. It's also not the sand which is needed for construction, because this get also rare. So this is really another type of sand which is needed. And if you compare it, for example, like a raw material like lithium, which is needed for the battery, it's really ugly process to get them. So, but the sand really also environmental free. And the technology is really, safe since more than 30 years in the industry, long time, nothing happened to that one. Of course, silicone has also some disadvantages. This is like with the current methods, you cannot detect them that they are biodegradable. And as one bad point is for them is to get the silicone, so the metal out of sand, you need a lot of energy. But a lot of people don't know that this process is mainly done to get the silicone for the electrical industry, to make chips, things like that. And the raw material which go out here for the silicones is just a byproduct, which will happen anyhow. Just some facts which might be interesting to share with you. But now let's concentrate us on the silicone wax. When I make normally trainings, I asking people, when you hear the word silicone wax, what do you have in mind? And a typical answer is that you see that the people describe it a bit like what you see here on the picture, a solid product. But correctly, a silicone wax have not to be solid. It can be also liquid. The definition of the silicone wax is alkyl modified silicone. That means it's the silicone backbone itself is then modified by long alkyl chains. That means I replace these small methyl groups. This makes the polymer really interesting for personal care. Normally, a silicone wax will be described in the first instance or first stage as an emollient, but this is now the point where we say it's a triple action because it is do more than to be an emollient. So it is a dispersing agent and it's a solubilizer for stuff. And even sometimes more, you can gain cooling effects, thickening effects. Of course, there are much more benefits, but as I said, three cool stuff of this technology is dispersing agent, solubilizer, emollient. What is now the silicone wax look a bit like? Here you can see a structure of that, as you see the small methyl group is replaced by a long alkyl chain. What brings you this is versus, for example, a classic dimethicone, this substance, and this is one key aspect, is best compatibility with organic substances and also with natural. So that means the silicone waxes are much more tolerant to natural ingredients than like a classic dimethicone or other stuff. By this modification, you get the best spreading and distribution of them. They helps to really to spread things. I'll show you later a bit more about that in the presentation. Some of them can improve emulsion stability, they gain water protection, can boost the SPF level. Of course, non-tacky feeling is typical for them, and they can increase viscosity. Coming to typical applications for these products, as I said so in the beginning, color cosmetic is really one of a big topic for them, but also you can use them as a nice ingredient in face creams or skin serums, skin treatments, things like that, but also sunscreen product silicone waxes are ideal to use. Some of them found also some ways in hair care, but today we concentrate us a bit more on these applications. Coming a bit to the product family we have in CHT, we have with our brand CHT Boursil Wax, there we have certain products, which you can see here, the different inky names like acetyldiamethicone, lauryl dimethicone, capryl methicone. So I don't read them, all of them, but so that is a family of them. You see on the name, we have always mentioned wax, that you have already the indication on our product type that it's a wax. And you find a bit of kind of a sensory overview here, but the best practice is of course to get a sample and test it, that you get a feel. Might is interesting, often the people notice if they look on this table, hopefully you notice this as well. Here is acetyldiamethicone with the inky name, here is acetyldiamethicone, and often the people ask, hey, why it is that? Two inky name, as a one inky name, two products, what's the difference? Quite simple. Here you have a long silicone backbone, here very short. Here we have a very light modification with alkyl groups, and this one is very high modified with alkyl groups. So totally different performance, but same inky name. Just to have here, just an overview. But let's talk more about the technology today. Coming in, why our silicone waxes work so well. And yeah, I prefer always to explain in simple ways that the people get it in mind. And so I hope that a lot of people of you are familiar with Jurassic Park. And in Jurassic Park, we have two dinosaurs, which the people like. One is the cool big one, T-Rex. And a lot of people like the Raptor. On the other hand, And I would say our silicone waxes are the Raptor. Why? This is a nice example. If you look on a T-Rex, and I think everybody know that T-Rex have these two small arms with these two fingers. And so the people really don't know what was the sense of these arms because they are too small. They don't know really what they do. And this is similar with a simple dimethicone. If you look here on the structure, I have just this small metal group here. This is similar to T-Rex arms, that this doesn't really bring a benefit to a formulator like you. If you look to the Raptor and you remember the movie, the Raptor was the cool dinosaurs. He was able to open doors, climbing up somewhere. So what he doing is he used beside his mouth and feet also the arms. And this is like the long alkyl group of a silicone wax here. So you get a function. And just as an example, if you think about it, you have an oil phase around, organic, can be, for example, almond oil. You have here a much longer group which have a much better affinity to the oil. So I get here the oil solubility, while I have just these small groups which don't get the affinity to the oil. So there is then more or less a separation, and that's changed totally. See it? Remember, maybe next time when you watch Jurassic Park, silicone wax like the Raptor. Going further, we have, of course, a second level of silicone waxes. That's the wax 055. Somebody asked me why I don't have here a dinosaur. I would say that could be these hybrid dinosaurs, which you find in the latest Jurassic Park stories. This Indominus Rex, or how they called, so where they put some technologies together. This is like our wax 055, because what we have here, we have still the silicone backbone, which is silicone soluble. As I mentioned, we get this oil soluble groups, as these Raptor arms, but now we have here also some PEX groups which get water soluble or hydrophilic. So I have 3 parts in one molecule, or polymer, which gives you also some interesting benefits, but later on more about that. Coming to a nice example, when I be normally in front instead of a presentation like here, I can make it easily. This demonstration is a nice test. That is exactly here on picture you can see. Is that what I described? You have your cetyldiamethicone blinded with olive oil in this case, nicely one phase, no separation, and here olive oil and dimethicone, 2 phases, they don't like each other. So that means the silicone waxes are tolerant polymers. And the reason is, as I mentioned, with this long alkyl modification, you have something which get lipophile and works together. Or in other way, what you can look also in this graph is, if you describe chemistry, you have inorganic chemistry, you have organic chemistry, and silicon chemistry. And the silicone wax is getting, by this modification level, far away from a silicon chemistry. It's much closer to the organic chemistry. So just as an example is, if you calculate the real dimethicone content of a wax 070, for example, you end up at between 10 and 20%. So that means the rest of the molecule is totally organic, which is also interesting to know. Coming to an example of them, this is one of the function, as I mentioned, is the solubilizing of such topic of a silicone wax. And what I tried here to show is an example for a primer gel. That's a primer gel just based on silicone. So that means here a recipe on the right side without, you can see we're using dimethicone 5 centistokes as to the main carrier, added a cross polymer, so typical recipe, and we tried to incorporate here almond oil. Then we said, okay, come on, if you have a primer you can claim contains almond oil, will be nice. And the result is a hazy product. It's not complete clear what you should expect if you use a 100% silicone primer. So what we did here with, you see then, we added the Raptor, the silicone wax, and this we blended together with these ingredients. So that means adding to this phase, it will result in a clear formulation. The reason why, I have more or less in my glass outside the silicone phase. This is my silicone phase. And then I got my organic. So that is my almond oil, for example. And then my silicone wax will be around like that. And the alkyl chain will be orientated like that. It's like a capsulation. And so based on that, I can bring it easily into the silicone phase with a nice, clear formulation. For example, you can do also the way around. So that means the silicone wax is totally flexible, because, for example, if I want to use just a small amount of cross polymer in almond oil, I can do the way around. That means in this case will be the oil phase outside, then the alkyl chain will orientate to the oil phase, and the silicone backbone will like capsulate the cross polymer. That will look a bit like that. Nice example. Going further, as I mentioned, silicones waxes are also excellent as a spreading agent. That was one of the key things. It's also maybe a next addition of them, but not all of the silicone wax does this. Why they do that is, I tried a bit to explain here in a simple way. So sorry, I've been not the best drawer. So that means I have here an oil droplet which is wetted with the silicone waxes. So similar, I made it before. So my silicone backbone outside and the alkyl chain. And everybody know silicones have a very, very low surface tension. So that means when this droplet get on contact with the skin, the silicone wax will orientate on the surface, alkyl chain go up, and then by this, the surface tension is reduced, and I get a good spreading. On the next stage, so the next silicone wax will go to the skin, and so on and so on, and so my drop spread very even and quickly. And that is, for example, also the reason why silicone waxes can enhance the SPF level, because I get with the same amount of the UV filters, I get a better covering and a more even covering of the skin. That is, for example, one reason of them. And this is much better with silicone waxes, as if you use, for example, cyclopentasiloxane or just a dimethicone, they don't show that topic. As an example is here in this simple test. So what we did was just a red pigment. So it's a organic red pigment coated, and we dissolved that in one slide with the D5 with cyclopentasiloxane and given on the filter paper. And you see what's happened. It was wetting perfect, but then it stopped to carry the red pigment. So the D5 decided, okay, I have no affinity to this one. I go my own way. So it's just walking, and you see it starts to spread, but don't carry on the red pigment. If you look on the right picture, totally opposite with the wax 070, this still cover with this long alkyl branches and the stuff on the pigment and say, oh, I hold together and we go together. So you see the red pigment is much better transported as here on this one. And of course, still the wax 70 move a bit, but not so far away like with the D5. So that works together and helps that you get a much even and more better covering. You can sometimes notice this if you have a color cosmetic formulation and you have, for example, D5 inside as one of a kind of spreading agent, high volatile, and you replace that, for example, by wax 40 or wax 70 from us, you get a much better say more intense color on the skin because of the better spreading and more even. That is just an example of them. So one more action of them, not just a nice skin feel, you have also additional benefits. Coming to the next point, which I mentioned in the beginning as a triple action, was silicone waxes, so for pigment. And yeah, I tried to highlight it a bit here, what's happened. So if you look on the pigment, normally the pigments often are organic. So that means there are some inorganic salts like iron oxides, cobalt salts, things like that. And in this case, the silicone wax prefer more to have the orientation here with this SeO binding of the polymer, because this is more inorganic, because it's like sand, it's inorganic. So this have the affinity, so they like each other. And then you have here now the advantage that I have this long alkyl chain which go away. While a dimethicone, for example, or D5 have just this small T-Rex arm which have, they don't know what to do with him. And with these alkyl groups, I have a much better interaction. Even, for example, my pigment is coated with something, some of these alkyl chains can then also work like a clamp. So they will then cover the pigment on the other hand and hold it better together. You get a much better covering and a much better dispersing. So that's describing this slide a bit. As I said, it's a lot of theory, but we had always the question, you find that also in old literature that silicone waxes does it, and we ask us, hey, is it true? Do they that? And okay, we said, okay, let's go to the lab and just play a bit around. And yeah, so we did several tests. So the first one we did was, and we said, okay, how does it look for hydrophobic titanium dioxide as a UV filter for sunscreen? And let's on to look on them if we blend them with different solubilizer. How does they will look? So we did just a simple blending of them. So the ratio was here 77% of the solubilizer and 23% of the titanium dioxide. So we loaded them. And finally, you can see already here that we looked also on the stability. There was some separation particles and okay. But I think more interesting will be the next slide, which is coming. So finally, what we did was we took a microscope picture of them and we looked how fine they are dissolved. And it's very important. We didn't use the Ultra Turax. We just blended by hand as good we could, because we said, let's see really the good job of them if they can really hydrate the pigments. What you nicely can see, like here on the alkyl benzoate, it looks like a bit like on the beach with water. It looks a bit like that, but the color here is coming just from the light from the microscope, so sorry for that. But you can see it looks not so even. It looks like there are wafers inside, something like that. So it looks so a bit like there is some movement in. Same with IPM. We see this line, it's not totally homogeneous. D5 looks like, also not so homogeneous, so fine lines. With the dimethicone 5 centistoke, it's already looked a bit better, but you still notice that it's not totally homogeneous. And then we did this test also on the spatula, where you can see, for example, these visible particles, which is here in the sink. That was just this reference. And if you look now to the silicone waxes here, the pictures are much finer. So you have really fine particle size you get here. As just that you see this picture, I just jump back, look on that, on this. So much difference between. And also here, you can see it's much nicer. Depends on your screen. I hope you can see it. You have here even this kind of a blue shine a bit on these edges, which is a good sign for very fine particle size. So that was with titanium dioxide. Okay, so on the next stage, we said, okay, how is it with, as I color pigments, so effect pigments? How does it look here? In this case, we choose as well as a reference silicon oil, cyclomethicone, as in this case, cyclopentasiloxane, IPM, the benzoate. In this case now is also mineral oil here that we didn't have with the titanium dioxide. And then again, we selected here these 3 silicone waxes. So the wax 040, the wax 055, and the wax 070. And what we did here was a 1-to-1 blend. And then we looked on the appearance. I think it describes a bit already on the color that you can see. But then I think it's interesting to see that. So we did here just the picture of these glass plates, which we used for the microscope. And I think already here, without any microscope, you can see the differences already. So I think just to point it a bit out, you can see, for example, if you look here on D5 or mineral oil, they look not really homogeneous. And you see, for example, really nicely looks wax 055 and the wax 070. So both looks here really already nice and have a very, say, even thing in this, glass plate. While, for example, the wax 040 is maybe not good as them because have a shorter alkyl chain. So the difference is the wax 055 is, I say, this hybrid. So that means I have alkyl groups and hydrophilic parts. So wax 070 was my cetyl modification. And the wax 040 is a caprylmedicone. I mean, I have a very short silicon chain and a short alkyl group. I mean here, so molecular maybe too low to get the same good performance like the wax 70 or wax 055. So just to see. But we looked also here on the microscope, and now on this slide, they are all on one slide. That is maybe easier to compare. But I think as you maybe notice already the pictures before, now with the microscope much better visible. So the D5, looks like I formed island. So that are single islands, no homogeneous matrix. And so I would say, so the second best option to get it is, if you look, IPM looks not too bad, dimedicone wax 040, but clear much better looks the wax 070 and the wax 055, much more homogeneous here in the picture to see that. That's with the gold pigments. Coming to the last challenge we did, also you find again the same products now, silicone oil, cyclopentasiloxane, IPM, alkyl benzoate, mineral oil, wax 40, 50, 5, 70. In this case, we blended now with a brown pigment mix, which is typical for BB creams and other stuff. So the iron oxide with titanium dioxide as a white pigment. So we blended them as well. And again, here we did the test with them on the microscope. So I know they look a bit, brown, but I think here it's immediately visible. And it was really astonished for us as well that the wax 055 was here really excellent. As interesting is to see with cyclopentasiloxane here, you can see some red iron pigments, even mineral oil. I think there was the black pigment. So they really looked not good. And the wax 055 was really excellent. Also the paste, when you look on it, what you get, very, very nice. So the wax 070, I think the second best, and wax 40 dimedicone coming close, but not as wax 70 and wax 55. And I think here you see also a big difference between organic and solubilizer and silicone solubilizer. So a really nice picture to see that and to get it on that. And just remember, we didn't use any homogenizer or any mill to blend them. We blend them just quite simple with a magnet stirrer and by hand finally. That's a bit with the pigments, and I hope that the thing was showing you that doesn't matter which pigment you go here, if you go with brown pigments, effect pigments, or even it's just titanium dioxide, you see the wax works with all. They are totally tolerant to anybody here in this case. Coming to examples where you can use that, where we use this technology. So for example, that's a highlighter formulation. I have that here. I don't know if you see my movie, but maybe my video. We put this in the stick. It's a solid stuff. It looks like a little bit like a gel with the silicone. So that's just silicone waxes, and we used here them to get it. So for example, in this case, the wax 070 is really in to bring all these pigments in and to get them stable. This one gives us the structure of the formulation. The caprylmedicone is a bit like the spreading agent and the light emollient with the isododecane together. And the 3-hydroxysterine helps a bit to get also the stability about all the temperature. That's a nice formulation. I have that here in my camera. It's covering also nicely, non-tacky, very quick to apply, and interesting formulation. Another thing which I want to point it out here is where we have this function is that we have here a foundation made. This is interesting. Why? If you look here on the viscosity, this has a viscosity of 300 MPa. That means more or less like liquid. Is why we call pipette foundation. And what we did here, we used here these pigments, this 4, and we dissolved them in the cetyl dimethicone and in the cetyl pack PPG 10-1 dimethicone. In this case, that was remember, this and this. And with them, we solubilized them, brought them into our oil phase here. There was a cross polymer in, a silicone emulsifier, some light emollient. Then we added some dimonium hectorate to get also a bit stabilization, some UV filters to get SPF level done, water, nice emulsion and totally stable. And that is just cause that I have this 2 here inside to get the pigments in. We did the trial with this formulation also without this one and using other technologies, and we get always the separation, this low viscosity. And interesting in these cases, this one is also here the second emulsifier for the system. So the first emulsifier is the PEC 10 dimethicone, and it have here beside the pigments also another function. It helps for the emulsification. Quite interesting formulation, very liquid, easy to spread. It's also ideal for cushion, for example. Coming to the product family again, you see this is again the similar slide before with the silicone waxes here. Just describe them where you can use them. So like solubilizer, spreading things where we talked. So might you are wondering, there are other silicone waxes in like this and this. We didn't talk about them today for pigments because they are solid. They have not the property to do that in this way. As you see, they are more related for waterproofing, cooling effect, thickening effect. So these are more the side effect of them. And also we tested like the Wax 020 and the Laurel dimethicone. They were not good as the Wax 070. In this case, in this test, they were not good. So we did this in the lab, but I didn't put this in today in the presentation because it will be too much pictures on one slide. So they were worse in this case. So we found out for this pigment dispersion, for example, Wax 70 and Wax 055 are the ideal products for that. The Wax 055 was not here in this table because it's not a typical emollient like that. It has some nice skin feeling, but it's also the main job of this one is an emulsifier. But it's really cool that it can really help to disperse pigments. And the product is also used from us successfully in hair care. And we have now started few products based on such thing we found out here that the people looked at now in for hair color. It's quite interesting because it's pH stable, heat stable. So no idea if it's working. There came up some ideas and we found 2 partners which are looking on that, and could be interesting. And I'm looking really forward which idea you will get out of this presentation today. Last but not least, we have also a for sample kit available with this pipette formulation. There is this primer inside, which I had in the beginning with the solubilization, this highlighter formulation. So if you totally be interested, you can contact Patricia. She will organize that for you. She have none of them available yet in Brazil, but that's no problem. From Germany, we can send down to her. So that's more or less at the end. So as I know, to old style technology of dimethicone, say yes to triplex technology with silicone waxes. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. It was not too boring. And I think I'd be totally happy if you next time see any dinosaur or Jurassic Park movie and you remember to my presentation. So thank you a lot.
Ok. Eu acho que nós temos aqui, então, algumas perguntas. Deixa eu verificar. Então, vamos lá. Uma das perguntas, qual será este filtro que foi utilizado no teste Waxes ensure uneven spreading? Então, qual filtro, eu imagino que seja, se foi filtro físico ou químico, e qual foi utilizado nesse slide?
I think the question was related, sorry, oops, was too far. I think this one, I guess. That was just a red pigment where we used, it was, I think, an iron oxide we used here for that case. So that was not a UV filter, but it works also with UV filter if you do the test.
Ok. Bom, quem fez essa pergunta, se caso tenha ainda ficado alguma dúvida, por gentileza, eu peço que entre em contato conosco. Perguntaram se estaremos demonstrando essas formulações na FCE. Não estaremos na FCE, mas se quiser também colocamos ali o nosso e-mail para que fiquem à disposição. Aí perguntaram sobre o Natural Index das ceras de silicones. Questionaram se essa cadeia alquílica é de origem petroquímica.
The alkyl chain of the silicone waxes is unfortunately petrochemistry. So the natural index will be more or less 0 of this product. The reason is it's difficult to get these wax groups from a natural search on the silicone wax. At the moment, we don't have such thing, but we have internally a project running where we look for that if it's not possible to do that. So that will be the next level.
Ok. Bom, pessoal, eu acredito que essas tenham sido as perguntas. Conforme mencionei, estamos aí à disposição. Espero que vocês tenham gostado da nossa apresentação, né? E quem quiser, entre em contato comigo, que a gente conversa mais a respeito aí das nossas tecnologias e, no caso de hoje, das ceras de silicone. Gostaria de agradecer ao Alex pela disponibilidade, pelo tempo e pela apresentação. E desejo a todos uma ótima quarta-feira e uma ótima semana. Muito obrigada.
Thank you also to everybody.